When you see a man of virtue, try to match him. When you see someone without virtue, examine yourself. Confucius didn't just offer teachings for personal ethics. He gave us a blueprint for navigating relationships and leadership. This phrase contains a transformative idea. The people around us are not problems to solve or rivals to surpass. They are mirrors. We live in a culture of comparison. We often see someone doing well and feel envy, or we notice someone's flaws and feel superior. Confucius invites us to abandon both habits. When you encounter someone wise, the question is not, why aren't I like them? But how can I become more like that? It shifts the focus from jealousy to aspiration, from feeling less to growing more. This is especially important in leadership. A good leader doesn't just command. They learn constantly from those around them. They don't fear the wisdom of others. They use it as a standard to improve themselves. And when you see someone lacking virtue, don't rush to judge. Confucius suggests we look inward instead. Am I ever like that? In what moments do I fall into the same patterns? This isn't self-blame. It's honest self-inquiry. It's a habit that turns conflict into clarity and annoyance into awareness. Ultimately, this way of thinking builds stronger relationships. We stop labeling people as better or worse. We start seeing everyone as a teacher. The wise teach us through their example. The unwise teach us through our reaction to them. Confucius understood. Leadership begins not in changing others, but in observing others and changing ourselves. When Confucius says, try to match him, he isn't speaking of shallow imitation or ego-driven competition. He is pointing us toward a mindset of respectful observation, of seeing someone's virtue and asking, what allows this person to act wisely? What can I learn from how they speak, decide, and serve others? In the world of leadership, this is not optional, it's essential. The best leaders aren't the ones who believe they already have all the answers. They're the ones who remain curious, open, and ready to grow by learning from everyone around them, including their own team members. A true leader doesn't feel threatened by someone wiser. On the contrary, they feel inspired. They understand that recognizing another person's strength does not diminish their own. It elevates the whole. Imagine a workplace where a manager watches one of their team members resolve a tense conflict with calm and empathy. Instead of reacting with jealousy or defensiveness, the leader reflects, am I embodying this kind of grace under pressure? What can I adopt from this approach in my own leadership? This type of humble observation strengthens a team. It creates a culture where each visible virtue becomes a chance for personal improvement. But this principle extends far beyond professional environments. In our personal lives, we encounter wisdom every day, if we're paying attention. Think of a friend who listens without interrupting, a partner who stays kind during stress, a family member who keeps their promises without boasting. These are examples of lived virtue, and we can choose to respond in two ways. We can envy it, or we can aspire to grow from it. Envy isolates us. It whispers, they're better than you. But admiration, true admiration, is active. It says, they're showing me what's possible. This kind of mindset makes space for growth, not competition. It replaces rivalry with humility. It turns comparison into connection. And here's what's remarkable. When you start looking for virtue in others, you begin seeing it everywhere. The world becomes a school, and people become teachers. Every interaction becomes a lesson, not because others are better, but because you are open. This is leadership in its purest form. Not leading from above, but walking alongside. Not pretending to be perfect, but being willing to evolve by learning from those who are one step ahead in a specific virtue. Confucius wasn't asking us to copy others blindly. He was inviting us to pay attention, to recognize the good in others and let it awaken the good in us. Because in the end, virtue cannot be copied. It must be cultivated. But the first step is seeing where it blooms in others and choosing consciously to plant the same seed within ourselves. The second part of Confucius's teaching is more uncomfortable. When you see someone without virtue, examine yourself. He doesn't say, judge them. He doesn't say, fix them. He says, look inward. Because often, what bothers us in others is a reflection of something unresolved within ourselves. This is especially powerful in leadership and relationships. A wise leader doesn't only learn from virtue, they also learn from what they witness as failure, ignorance, or even misconduct. But they don't use it as ammunition to criticize. They use it as a mirror. Am I slipping into something similar? Do I behave this way under pressure? Am I blind to my own faults? Imagine a manager who gets irritated watching another leader constantly criticize their team. It's easy to point and say, that's poor leadership. But a wiser move is to pause and reflect. Have I been doing the same lately? When was the last time I offered praise or encouragement instead of focusing on mistakes? This kind of inward questioning turns the faults of others into tools for self-awareness. In personal life, it's the same. You might find yourself annoyed by someone who's always impatient, reactive, or selfish. But sometimes, the emotion you feel isn't just about them, it's about what their behavior triggers in you. Maybe you're seeing a part of yourself you don't like. Maybe you're reacting to something unresolved. Confucius isn't advocating guilt. He's teaching consciousness. This isn't about blaming yourself for others' flaws, but about noticing your reactions, your judgments, your discomforts, and using them as clues. When we observe others' faults without reflection, we become critical. When we observe them with self-inquiry, we become wiser. This mindset changes relationships. Instead of reacting with judgment, we respond with empathy. We recognize that we're all in process, that nobody is finished, and everyone at some point mirrors our strengths or our weaknesses. This doesn't mean we excuse harmful behavior or avoid accountability. It means we start with ourselves. We shift from blame to growth. And that shift is transformative in leadership. A leader who sees a mistake and reflects on their own tendencies builds trust. They don't point fingers, they model humility. And that humility inspires others to grow, not out of fear, but out of shared responsibility. Confucius reminds us that even the flaws we see around us have value. They can wake us up, show us where we've gone numb, reveal the corners we've avoided. In this way, every difficult interaction becomes an invitation, not to judge, but to understand, not to correct others, but to refine ourselves. And that is not weakness, that is leadership grounded in virtue. Confucius believed that authentic leadership doesn't come from power, it comes from example. To him, virtue was not a side note, it was the foundation of all meaningful leadership. It doesn't matter how much you know or how many people follow you. If you don't lead from virtue, your impact will be shallow and short-lived. But what does it mean to lead with virtue? It means your actions speak louder than your advice. It means you are the first to practice what you preach. It means you seek the good of the whole, even when no one is watching. A virtuous leader observes the wise with humility and the unwise with compassion. They are inspired by the strengths they see in others, and they reflect honestly on the weaknesses they witness, not to judge, but to grow. This kind of leadership doesn't need to dominate, because it naturally draws people in. It doesn't need to shout, because its presence speaks. It doesn't rely on punishment, because its consistency transforms. In personal relationships, the same principle applies. Someone who leads from virtue doesn't manipulate or demand respect. They generate it. Because when virtue is genuinely lived, it inspires without effort. But this path isn't easy. It requires courage, the courage to look inward, to correct oneself, to resist the pride that comes from always thinking you're right. Leadership from virtue is not about being flawless. It's about being transparent, humble, and committed to growth. Confucius teaches us that true power lies not in controlling others, but in mastering ourselves. And when someone lives from that place, they become a light in the lives of others, a light that doesn't blind or burn, but guides. They lead not by force, but by being, not by commanding, but by embodying what they ask of others. This is the leader people follow even when they don't have to, the leader who teaches through who they are. And in a world filled with noise, the quiet strength of virtue may be the most powerful voice of all. In every person we meet, there is an opportunity to learn, to be inspired, or to better understand ourselves. That is the essence of Confucius's teaching. When you see someone wise, don't compare yourself. Draw closer. Watch, learn, be grateful. And when you see someone act without virtue, don't walk away with judgment. Turn inward. Ask yourself if any part of that behavior lives in you and how you might grow from recognizing it. This approach reshapes how we lead and how we relate. It moves us out of ego and back into humility. It shifts us from criticism to compassion. It's not about being perfect. It's about being honest, about being willing to see ourselves in others and using every encounter as a spark for growth. When you see a man of virtue, try to match him. When you see someone without virtue, examine yourself. Let this phrase walk with you like a silent compass. Let every moment that impacts you in someone else become a moment of reflection in yourself. Because in the end, to lead, to love, and to live with virtue is not about controlling others. It's about transforming yourself. And through that transformation, you become a guide, not through power, but through example, not by pointing the way, but by being the way.